For our next guest, we have Trevor Grizzle II with Equality's Enemy, Systemic Racism.
Woo! Wait a second, Trevor.
Go, Trevor. Hey.
Yeah.
Oh.
Stick to basketball. That's the only chance for you to succeed as a black person. These were the encouraging words of my uncle's teacher. My own father's career planner told him he'd find him a job in a factory. My father shortly declined after seeing all of his white friends were given jobs in office buildings while he was only offered one in a factory. I asked both my father and my uncle why they were not encouraged to aim higher. They told me that the organizations at the time had low expectations for black people, rather focusing their attention on successful white people. Such words could have caused them to become bitter or even discouraged, but rather became the motivation to succeed. Why do you think that two people, a teacher and a career planner, would say such demotivating things to the people they're supposed to be helping? Was racism a part of this? Well, usually when we talk about racism, we talk about people being discriminated against, or a meme we saw on the internet, or a joke we heard. But truth be told, if you were to ask the average person what racism is, it would be very hard for them to give you a straight definition. Even I was confused about the many aspects of racism until having an in-depth conversation with my uncle, Dr. Clifton R. Clark, a professor in African American Studies, on the way to a Los Angeles Lakers game in Los Angeles. The Lakers did lose, but that's another story for another time. Now, what I talked about extensively was institutional racism. What we talked about on the way there was a 2-hour drive, so we talked a lot about institutional racism. Institutional racism, also referred to as systemic racism. It's found in areas such as wealth, incarceration, representation, and education, along with many other subjects not shown in this slide. Now, for you to understand further what racism is, you must understand the definition of all these words I'm just throwing at you. Racism, in the words of my uncle, is prejudice with the addition of power. You can think of this almost as a math equation. Prejudice plus power is equal to racism. Prejudice is the ability to choose according to your own biases, and power in this instance is all the societal structures I previously mentioned. Now, racism in America especially is historic, and it's still unconsciously shown through systems and people today, in statistics such as these. In the second quarter of 2022, 75% of white people were homeowners compared to 45% of black people. The overall income for African Americans was 49% lower than for whites. And even in medicine, 243 more black women often die from pregnancy and childbirth than white women. These statistics tell us something. Either black people are being unequally treated, or we are given unequal access to what is necessary to maintain a good life. This brings the question, are black people more criminal or inferior than white people in America? Well, either they are inferior or we are being treated unfairly. Now, when you have moral questions such as these, it's always good to consult the Bible, which is what I did. And Leviticus 24:22 says, "You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and the native, for I am the Lord your God." This means that even God himself is opposed to inequality in laws and organizations. And if he's against it, why shouldn't we be? Now, we have to realize that institutional racism has nothing to do with our personal prejudice, feelings, or racism, but rather systems that we had no control of and that have been a part of America and other countries for centuries. The genealogy of racism can be tracked all the way back to the forced capture and removal of Africans by the transatlantic slave trade. Slaves were considered unequal and less than other people, and therefore were treated like chattel. Chattel slavery is a system which allowed Africans to be considered legal property that could be bought, sold, and owned forever. Yet other instances such as segregation and Jim Crow laws have also affected institutional racism in America. But even though there have been many laws and acts passed to prevent atrocities like this from happening ever again, they have not effectively stopped some of the atrocities from happening, and therefore many black people have not been able to effectively live the American dream. The best case of this in our own state is the Tulsa Race Massacre. Now, as you can imagine, many profitable businesses being destroyed and many people being murdered has left many inheritors left with nothing and no money, no academic success because of this. There is no legal, because of systemic racism, there were no legal repercussions for most of the people who took part in the massacre, and black people were given no aid, left with nothing and given nothing, and even charged with crimes that they did not commit. With such an example as this, it's easy to see why African Americans have not been able to effectively live the American dream. Now, how to get over this, the way to recover from all these detrimental things to African Americans and a way forward from all these things has to be, number one, equality. Equality is required for a way forward, and an equal treatment within societal structures must be monitored, addressed, and uprooted. Number two, equity. African Americans and others must be valued and treated impartially. Blacks must be paid and remunerated for working at the same level as whites. Number three, diversity. Monitoring and providing fair and equal access to opportunities for African Americans. With all these being combined, we can find a better future. Now, our personal responsibility is to report and manage any systemic racism that we can control or see. But even if these systems do not change, there will always be people like my uncle and my father and many others who decide to succeed anyway, no matter the circumstances. Now, even though they will succeed anyway, this does not make any of this excusable, and this still must be stopped. But I believe that even though this will take, maybe not even our lifetime will we see this change, but if we all strive for this future, we will be able to see an equal and equitable and a diverse future where liberty and justice is truly for all. Thank you.
And last but not least, we have